video is sponsored by CoolStuffInc.com and brought to you by my lovely patrons! In June of 2024, Wizards of the Coast did the worst thing the company has ever done. They changed all of Magic the Gathering's cephalid into octopi. What do you mean that's far from the worst thing? Sorry, they sent the Who to whose house? Hello, spicy people of the internet. I'm Spice8Rack, aka I cut my hair for me and not for you, and welcome back to the channel. First printed in Odyssey, cephalids were a secondary empire of manipulative tentacle people scheming in the waters of Otaria, whilst all of the landlubbers chased around after a horribly irradiated magic 8-ball. They were also key players on Riptide Isle, a supposedly isolated arena of biological experiments where humans and cephalids joined together to try and recreate the sliver species based on remains salvaged from the Wrathy stronghold. Unfortunately, the first researcher to ask, "Hey gang, any clue why we're choosing to do this?" did so exactly 5 seconds before the slivers inevitably broke free from containment and escaped to rapidly breed their way across the face of Dominaria. Oopsie, and indeed, poopsie. Cephalids were also seen in streets of New Capenna, sporting far more humanoid forms, with their tentacles becoming sick as hell hair plugs rather than the more traditional limb replacements. This does raise the question as to how bloody the floors of Capenna's barbershops get, and I expect a full vignette exploring that idea when we next return to the plane. Now, however, cephalids have been quietly and rather unceremoniously errated, with all cephalid creatures now technically being octopuses rather than their more specific and original fantasy creature type. I've now said the plural of octopus both of the ways it's technically correct to say, so I expect that no one will be angry at me in the comments. But this is far from the first instance of Magic contracting the boundaries of its creature types. In Outlaws of Thunder Junction, many players noticed that a character like Laughing Jasper Flint was categorised as a lizard, whereas before, humanoid lizard characters were more often labelled as Viashinu. Indeed, this set heralded the end of the Viashinu creature type, with all previous Viashinu in the game being also errated to be lizards. But why does this happen? Well, in some cases, such as the Naga creature type getting changed to snakes and the cat subtype getting dropped from Rakshasa cards, this has been done because both Naga and Rakshasa are actually part of the stories and myths of existing cultures and religions, and their depictions here are more the results of a decades-long game of telephone between generations of unconsciously Orientalist games designers, rather than being accurate and respectful recreations of another culture's iconography. I made a little video about this and many other topics that you can go and watch if you like. Please do not pay attention to the runtime. In the cases of Cephalid and Viashino, however, entirely original elements of world building from within Magic the Gathering, the reasoning is less clear. When asked about the removal of Viashinus, Mark Rosewater on his Blogatog said that this is part of a move towards known creature types if one applies. Of course, this is also done for a mechanical and gameplay reason as well. Snake decks can now run Ramunap Excavator and Sidisi Undead Vizier in their lists if they want to. Neither Viashinu nor Lizards had a solid mechanical identity beyond tending to be centered in red, but now that they've been consolidated into one creature type, new kindred strategies can be pursued without one or the other getting left in the dust. Bloomburrow, the first half of a 1-2 punch Wizards decided to pull specifically on me and my partner, who fuck with Brambley Hedge as equally as we do Uzumaki, is introducing lizards as one of the 10 animal groups that will receive new kindred strategies going forward, at least in this set. Neatly incorporating decades of lizard-adjacent creatures into a newly supported creature type. Generally, this seems to be a better move for the game. More streamlined, more synergistic, easier to understand, more fun. However, that would be the conclusion reached by a fucking coward. Sorry, did you think I played Magic the Gathering to have fun, Mark? I play Magic the Gathering so that I can be smarter than everyone. I play Magic the Gathering so that when I cast Omo, Queen of Vesuva, I can name Pincher as every choose a creature type effect, because there's exactly one card in the game's entire history which just so happens to produce Pincher tokens. If I wake up one day to see that Summoning Station has gotten reprinted, but it now makes constructs or servos, I will not be held responsible for my actions. The list of obsolete creature types in Magic is already so long. Over the years, we've not only lost elements of this game's history, like Cephalids and Viashino, but also such gems as Eater, Island Fish, Being, and who can forget dear Uncle Istvan. Uncle Istvan isn't just a human, Mr. Rosewater. He's also a man whose sibling had at least one child. Put some respect on that creature type. Well, today we say no more. The obsolete list is long enough. The Cephalid is the last weirdo type line to get thrown onto the trash heap of this game, alongside Banding and 404 article not found. Join me now, dear viewer, as I remember that this channel used to be about having fun, and let's save Magic the Gathering's most endangered creature types. Oh shit, my luck. Oh, Christ! Oh. Okay, so doing a clap sync whilst one hand is on a microphone is going to be a little bit difficult, but there we go. Unlike actual zoological endangerment, endangerment in Magic the Gathering doesn't have all that much to do with quantity of creature types. Also, unlike actual zoological endangerment, Magic the Gathering's endangered creature types can be saved with small games design changes, rather than necessary and targeted political action that must only become more devastating and frequent as time marches on. There are, for example, only 4 Bushwag types in the whole of Magic the Gathering. However, that's the funny ha-ha creature, so it's in it for the long haul, as opposed to the 64 now erratted Viashino. Additionally, having creature type specific synergy effects, such as Lord-style abilities, doesn't necessarily save a creature type from errata, as you might expect. Abishan's ability, as printed, requires Cephalid to activate, but now officially asks for Octopi instead. So, in what context do Magic the Gathering creature types need to exist in before they are slated for categorical eviction? Well, first, there needs to exist a either more broad real-world creature type or archetypal fantasy race that they could easily slide under the umbrella of. Think of Naga with snakes for the former, and mummies with zombies for the latter. Next, there needs to be a lack of mechanical singularity. Lore significance alone doesn't cut the mustard. The Cephalid were important for Magic's story. Not important enough for me to mention them in my entire video on the game's narrative, but regardless, how were they actually represented in the game? Their sole kindred commander, Abishan, cared about tapping stuff down, and lots of other Cephalid also had tapping-related abilities, but that was kind of it for uniqueness. Evidently, that was not nearly enough to save this creature type from becoming one with the octopus. Contrast this with Mongers and Spell Shapers. 2 seldom reprinted and even less remembered creature types that have yet to be axed by wizards and errata to be, well, probably wizards. Almost certainly because their creature type denotes a very specific and unique mechanical effect. Mongers, which sounds like British slang for a group of ugly people, and is also just adjacent enough to an actual racial epithet that I do not want to continue saying this word in this video. These cards all have activated abilities that any player can pay mana to activate. And Spell Shapers also have activated abilities where you choose to discard a card from your hand to create a lesser and specific ability. Llanowar Mentor, for example, activates to create Llanowar Elves, and Waterfront Bouncer activates to cast Unsummon. Indeed, this card is how Unsummon style effects attained the slang of Bounce. And finally, we have the Beeble scale, one of many charts drawn up by Mark Rosewater, which ranks the likelihood of certain elements of Magic the Gathering returning in the future. This, as the name suggests, deals specifically with creature types, and ranges from creatures who are likely to return in the next set if not the one after, such as humans and goblins, to more unusual or plain specific creature types such as Aetherborn and ninjas, to creature types whose last printing we may have already seen, such as Beeble, Feldegriff, and Child. Of course, none of these factors on their own make a creature type vulnerable to errata. Mer are incredibly high on the Beeble scale, however they have a very unique place in Magic's story and a clear aesthetic and mechanical identity. Robots and constructs do nearly identical things in the game, however the types are kept separate as the former deals with more universes beyond automata, whereas the latter is more at home in Magic's canon, where you have more limited or more explicitly magical living machines. Equally, I would struggle to tell you what the unique mechanical identity of humans represents in Magic the Gathering, but something tells me that they're probably going to stick around for at least a couple more sets. I've got a hunch on this one I'm pretty confident about. Really, our at-risk creature types need to fall into most of, if not all, of the categories that we just talked about if we're going to genuinely consider them to be endangered. Number 1. There needs to exist a real world or fantasy creature type that they could easily be included under the umbrella of. Number 2. There needs to be a distinct lack of a unique mechanical identity tied to their creature type. And number 3. They need to have a high ranking on the Beeble scale. So with all of these in mind, what are Magic the Gathering's most endangered creatures? First on our list is the noble Homarid, an exclusively blue creature type that resembles giant crabs or lobsters. A Homarid did appear in Outlaws at Thunder Junction, the set that did away with the Viashinu, complete with cowboy hat and pun-based flavour text, but they are still high on my personal danger scale for getting folded into the crab creature type. Can we get the danger scale on screen, please? Great. My reasoning for this is threefold. First off, carcinisation, a joke that I stole from my friend Georgie. Secondly, Homarids are a far less substantial element of Magic's lore than Cephalids are, both of them originally hailing from Dominaria, and we saw how unceremoniously the latter was treated when it came to their errata. And thirdly, we've only seen 2 new Homarid printed in the last 15 years, and both of their mechanics clearly jut up against the contemporary design of Magic's crab creatures. Answer me this, right? Consider all of Magic the Gathering's crab cards, something that I do each night before I go to bed, and you're asked to pick out the most iconic one of the bunch. What immediately springs to mind? No, non-mutant crabs. Okay, I honestly didn't even know that was a crab. No, that's the wrong answer. This is an incorrect answer. Horseshoe crabs aren't crabs, they're Clarisserata. It's a totally different species. It's far closer to being a spider or a scorpion than it is a crab. This needs errataing, not cephalids, not Viashinu. If this card isn't a spider by 2026, so help me God, I will find you! No, you silly sausage. It's Hedron Crab, a central piece for mill decks throughout multiple formats. Hedron Crab even got an upgrade and spiritual successor in Ruin Crab. Both are blue crustaceans that mill in incidental ways. Now let's compare them to the last 2 Homarids that we've seen in print, and the similarities are striking. Both crabs and Homarids look very similar. They're in the same colour, and now as we can see, they play with the same mechanics. So if we are to save the Homarid as a unique creature type, they are in need of a desperate mechanical makeover. Or should I say, A desperado mechanical makeover. I shouldn't have said that. I actually have a court order not to. So what do we have to work with here? Well, obviously, as we've said before, the two most recent Homarids we've seen mill, and we can't go down that crabby route. According to my notes, the next most recent card is a suspend creature with blue fire breathing, which doesn't help us at all. Next, we have one that taps down green creatures, which is even more niche than the Cephalid, so that's not going to be of much use to us. There's one which has you sacking swamps and snow swamps to destroy creatures, which is somehow even more niche and also is fully outside of Blue's colour pie. Next, we have a big bastard, one that mills its controller as a cost of keeping it around, and that can gain Shroud but can't untap if it does. Okay, that's a little bit more unique. We could work with that. We actually have another one that has the same last ability here, and finally we have the titular Homarid itself. It gets tide counters each turn. With 1 counter, it's a 1-1. With 3, it's a 3-3. And when it hits 4, you start all over again. Okay, this is going to be a bit fucking tricky, isn't it? Okay, no, we can synthesize these ideas. The rising and the lowering of the tide is a fun concept. I like the idea that at low tide, your Homarids are more protected but less effective, and then at high tide, they are more powerful, more able to plunge deeper onto land, but more vulnerable as a result. And I also really like the idea of tracking this change using these tide counters. Creature types in Magic's past have often distinguished themselves from each other by using highly specific and unique counters. Phyrexians use poison and oil counters. Thalids use spore counters. And cards which I can't wait to equip onto tiny Bloomburrow mice use rev counters. The list goes on. So let's give this a go. Here is my concept for a new and more unique modern Homarid. Homarid Spy, it's a 1-1. At the beginning of your end step, add or remove a tide counter from card name. So long as card name has 1 or fewer tide counters on it, it has hexproof and doesn't untap during your untap step. Whenever card name deals combat damage to a player, draw a card for each tide counter on it. How's that? You can either add or remove counters from it, dipping in and out of the safety of the water, or you can go for broke, deciding not to protect your card draw engine, but instead to plunge deep into land, drawing more cards as you do, but fundamentally leaving the safety of the shallows. Just to expand this proof of concept, here's another Homarid, one based on a card that we discussed earlier in this video that would also use this mechanic. Homarid Bastard, it's a 6-6. At the beginning of your end step, add or remove a tide counter from card name. So long as card name has 1 or fewer tide counters on it, it has hexproof and doesn't untap during your untap steps. Otherwise, you mill 2 cards for each tide counter on card name. Again, you can either stay close to the shoreline, ducking in and out of relative safety, or you can throw caution to the wind, being able to consistently attack with your 6-6, but milling upwards of 10 cards every 2 turns if you do. In Limited, that might be a great risk, but in some constructed formats with self-mill strategies, this could be a very interesting engine indeed. With a focus on tide counters as well, we could even have Homarids that don't necessarily directly benefit from them, but who can manipulate their placement so that your synergies proc better. Homarid Surfsayer, it's a 2-1. Card name enters with a tide counter on it. At the beginning of your end step, choose one. Either move a tide counter from another Homarid you control onto card name, or move a tide counter from card name onto another Homarid, or land, full stop. Lands with tide counters on them are islands in addition to their other types. I've purposefully left out the you control clause on that second option, mainly because I'm one of those sick freaks who really enjoys old Magic the Gathering creature synergies where one player's board affects another player's board if they're playing with the same creature type. One of my guilty pleasures is watching Sliver mirror matches in EDH because of just how wacky their board states get. I also love the idea that if you're ever playing a Kindred deck and end up in a mirror match against an opponent playing that same creature type, that your synergy pieces don't just need to act as useful tools for your side of the board, but as hyper-specific weapons to use against those opponents. Like how you could use this card to put a tide counter on an oppositional Homarid and force it to surface from the deep far sooner than your opponent wanted it to, getting rid of its hexproof. Or even putting an extra tide counter on the big bastard and forcing your opponent to mill themselves out far faster than they'd calculated. I think that creature type specific hate pieces are such a unique and flavorful element of Magic the Gathering's games design, and that it's a genuine travesty that cards like Tivadar Thorn don't get printed nearly as often as I think they could, and indeed should be. I do recognise, however, that the whole lands with tide counters on them are islands in addition to that other types thing is pretty much just a one-to-one copy of how flood counters already work in the game. But frankly, I'm happy letting R&D worry their pretty little heads about how to deconfuse that mess. It's time for you and me to move on to save Magic the Gathering's next most endangered creature. Let's go. You know, I used to write plays about how the internet as a tool was being turned into the vanguard of our youth's fascistic radicalization. You know, stuff that mattered. Another one of Magic's Dominarian originals, Kavu on average have 2 legs, between 2 and 4 arms, and a pretty foul temper. This is the least immediately aggressive picture of a Kavu I could find, and please do note that he is literally screaming fire. First seeing the fluorescent light of the LGS back in 2000 with Invasion Block, Kavu are ancient beasts awoken from the very mantle of Dominaria itself to fight against Phyrexia by Multani. A sometimes goofy, sometimes yoked, often clingy avatar of nature. And it's in that description that the kernel of my anxiety lies, in that Kavu are fundamentally beasts. Beast is a particularly strange and strained creature type in Magic the Gathering, being in the game since its very first year of existence, and always finding a home on several cards for each subsequent set, but with wildly limited support. To put this disparity in context, there are over 200 more beast cards in Magic the Gathering than there are dragon cards. Yet the latter boasts over 80,000 decks on EDH Rec, and the former barely scrapes by with 2k, positioning it just ahead of monk decks and just behind scarecrow decks. That's how unsupported beasts are. That's beating beasts. But who's to say that beast cards wouldn't get a shot in the arm if Kavu relinquished their, frankly, selfish grip on originality? Kavu Monarch would give all of your beasts trample if they didn't have it already. Kavu Howler would let you draw a bunch of beast cards. Heck, even Kavu Mauler would be fantastic on the swing with a bunch of 3/3 beast tokens. And they're really not that far off. Whilst I was making this video, I stumbled across the card Kazandu Stomper, a beast card from Zendikar Rising that majorly resembles the Kavu. Note the 2 legs, 4 arms, and weird sort of cat-lizard hybrid energy they've got going on. If a card that looks this much like a Kavu is a beast, and there's this massive gap in the mechanical market, I really don't think that recategorization is such an unexpected or unanticipated event in the pipeline. I mean, as well, the beast subtype is good enough for Baloth, Felidar, Boggles, and Wumpai. Spire Spine didn't get all hoity-toity and insist on being a porcupine, did it, Kavu? Beast was good enough for it. Oh, what, you think you're better than a Rethizon Dorstatum manifested from Nyx by pseudo-Grecan deities? Look at yourself, rising from the very mantle of our plane of existence, taking up our ludo-onomastic real estate, putting pressure on our mana resources while we're full up, Kavu. Get on a boat and go back to your own country. Sorry about that. Now that he's finally become an MP, the BBC are broadcasting a mandatory listening hour of Nigel Farage speeches, and it's beginning to warp my perception of reality. Personal qualms with how Magic the Gathering deals with its beast cards aside, however, I think it's time for us to save the endangered Kavu from getting rolled into that mechanical subtype catch-all. So, what is the Kavu's whole deal? Up until this point, what has been the mechanical identity of the Kavu, and is there anything we can focus on to bring about a new form of the creature? Well, lots of Kavu have fire-breathing style effects, which is hardly unique to that creature type, and loads of beasts have that as well, so that's not what we're going to be focusing on. Moving on, lots of Kavu have kicker costs, which has less to do with them specifically as Kavu and more to do with the fact that they came from Dominaria, and that's the place where what kicker gets a lot of action. There is a Kavu that gains +1/+1 counters whenever your opponents gain life, which, granted, is a swing away from ubiquity to uniqueness, but maybe a tad too great of one. And finally, we have lots of Kavu that care about permanent colours and basic land types, which is obviously already the mechanical domain of, Oh, we could work with that. Yeah, there is a genuine gap in the market. Lots of creature types are in 5 colours, slivers, dragons, Atog, etc., but very few care about colour identity itself. Indeed, if you were to build a Kavu commander deck today, you would probably want Jarad Carthalion at your helm, both creating Kavus, also letting you play every Kavu, and buffing your Kavu based on the number of colours they are. And it does bear emphasising that there already exists precedent for wizards making this the Kavu's mechanical selling point. Territorial Kavu obviously has domain and thus wants to see all 5 basic land types. Yavimaya Kavu has a fun ability where its power is tied to red creatures and its toughness is tied to green creatures. Kavu Chameleon can turn itself into any colour. Tundra Kavu can turn a land into an island or a plains, and indeed, Kavus have been printed in all 5 of Magic's colours. More or less. Kavu are a classic, and by classic I do mean old, creature type in Magic the Gathering. And similarly, classic cards which care about permanent colours or basic land types don't often get a look in even in the sideboards of most decks in most formats, let alone the main board. And I am indeed including the magical dress-up box that is Commander in that. So it would be such a neat treat to have this niche, janky and classic creature type becoming the new home for these niche, janky and classic Magic the Gathering cards. I mean, that's what it's really about, isn't it? Rediscovering the feeling that we first had when we were playing Magic the Gathering, where every new card was a surprise and a shock to us. I loved sitting down at a table with my 8.5 Tails deck when it was still built and reintroducing my fellow players to cards like Glare of Heresy, exactly in the moment that I used it to remove their Cabal coffers from the game. I've seen many players attempting to make Mind Bend and Totally Not Urza style effects work in their decks, but what if there was now a creature type that could consistently pay off those effects? Ones that themselves meddled with the colour of your opponent's permanents and indeed their land types. Kavu forcing your opponent's lands to better fit the territories that they need to expand. Here's a couple of concepts. Kavu Herald. It's a 2/2. Tap to add green or red to your mana pool, then choose one. Target land becomes the basic land type of your choice until end of turn, or target creature becomes the colour of your choice until end of turn. Paired with the delicious vintage of Kavu Planestalker. Make it a 4/3. Whenever card name attacks, if the defending player controls 2 or more planes, tap target creature defending player controls. Okay, that's a little bit plain. How about something a tad more juicy? Kavu Greed Feeder. It's an 8/8. If there are 4 or more basic land types among permanents any opponent controls, creatures those players control can't block Kavu creatures. Of course, we shouldn't just focus on land types in our strategy here. Why, you could pair Kavu Herald with another Kavu that cares about colours, such as Shimmerhide Kavu. Make it a 2/3. Other red Kavu you control have, whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell you don't control for the first time each turn, you may choose new targets for that spell. Then reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land card, in this state, it would be easy to turn Kavu into yet another 5-colour creature type, but what I think would be far more interesting, and arguably healthier for the game, would be if Wizards restricted them to just 4 colours. This way, players would not only need to search up niche payoffs to this strategy, but also niche setups. How do I consistently trigger Domain if I'm not allowed to run blue cards or even islands in my deck? Well, that, dear clever player, is a puzzle for you and your friends to solve. I'm a massive believer in the fact that deck construction is inherently more interesting and fun when theoretical or legal limitations are imposed upon it. Not financial limitations, though. That shit's just liberalism, and I'll tell you what for nothing, this bitch ain't invited to the pool party afterwards. Additionally, and this is just me whinging at this point, but we do want a new Dune Brood commander. The only way to build this colour combination in EDH right now is either with the commanders and partners that were printed in this product, or with Max and Will from Stranger Things. And that's just a little bit silly, isn't it? Hey all, you probably noticed that my microphone's been popping a bunch in this video, as well as rattling whenever I move it too quickly, and I really cannot apologise enough about that. It's old and the pop shield on it doesn't do jack. I'll be buying a new one before my next video. Which is why I needed today's sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com. CoolStuffInc.com is a website whose owner pays me money to tell you that they have cards, Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, One Piece, which some very nice fellows at my Bristol LGS have gotten me unironically interested in giving a go, and much more. What's even better than that is that by simply writing SPICE at the checkout, you can get 5% off any order. Imagine what you could spend those savings on. Then replace that image in your head with more product from CoolStuffInc.com. So head on over, use code SPICE and save 5% off your next purchase. Now, back to our final endangered creature type. Kithkin? Spice, is your hog so thick that it's taken all the blood away from your brain? Wizards of the Coast has already confirmed that we're going back to Lorwyn/Shadowmoor, and Kithkin were a unique and iconic part of that world's lore. There's no way that the company are gonna errata them. To that I'd say, firstly, you need to relax. And second off, no, I wasn't going to do a real spit take. I'll commit to a bit, but not when it involves either spitting water all over my lighting or spitting water all over the extension cable that my lighting is plugged into. Thirdly, and most relevantly, yes, the Kithkin are iconic, but what in the game makes them unique? In terms of the lore, it's the thought weft, the semi-social hive mind of sorts that allows the Kithkin to better empathise with and understand each other. Something that in Shadowmoor transitions into being a psychic barrier between them and the other species of the plane, underpinning their settlement's xenophobia. This, just as an aside, is an incredible way to represent duality in your story. Lorwyn and Shadowmoor absolutely whips. And I await our return with great expectation. But Viashinu and Cephalid both have lore which separates them from lizard folk and octopi, at least on Dominaria, and that didn't save them from errata. Additionally, whilst halflings are at present only in Universes Beyond, a product range that I also have thoughts about, I don't think that the distinction is quite as compelling as that between robots and constructs. Halflings are, of course, present in the Lord of the Rings expansion, but they're also in the multiple D&D crossover products, an IP so close to Magic the Gathering that it's the only universe beyond the game that has seen a standard legal printing. Seeing as Wizards of the Coast has been tripping over themselves of late to ensure that no game object remains niche, for example, how Assassin's Creed's free running ability triggers off of both assassins and commanders for no lore reason other than EDH players may be compelled to buy booster packs this way, would they really skip the opportunity to quietly errata Kithkin so that their Harbinger could go and search up Samwise Gamgee, or Archivist of Ogma? Halfling is an immediately recognisable and monetizable fantasy concept. Kithkin is far more unique and requires explanation and creative engagement with brilliant world building to properly grasp. Of course they're on the chopping block. Additionally, as has been the theme for this video, what is the mechanical identity of the Kithkin? Without looking up any more of their cards, what do Kithkin actually tend to do? Well, they're centered mainly in white. Some of them care about life gain and creating tokens and +1/+1 counters and helping other creature types, but nothing stands out as specifically Kithkin. All of the other creature types in Lorwyn had something mechanically unique to them. The merfolk cared about islands. Fairies cared about doing stuff on your opponent's turns. Elves flew private jets to attend January 6th. Everyone had something unique about them, except for the Kithkin. So, if we are to save another of Magic's creatures from being swallowed by the maw of homogeneity, then we need to give the Kithkin a mechanical facelift. Let's get some inspiration. The most commonly played Kithkin in EDH presently are all cards which care about other creature types. Soldiers, knights, clerics, etc. Now, I'm a absolute suckover. Suckover? I mean, you put enough tequila in me, you'll see, baby. As anyone who's watched my Lorwyn video can attest to, I love crossover creature type synergy cards. I think that they create such an immediate depth of world building through mechanics alone. I saw the little mouse that gives bats and bunnies and birds +1/+1 from Bloomburrow. I see you games designers, and I implicitly know that this is a world of collaboration and not conflict. Mwah, well done, kisses for you. However, as lore appropriate as it would be for this to be the Kithkin's thing, I just don't think that our creature type helps other creature types is a unique enough selling point to prevent them from being made to house share in the Shire. Let's get some further inspiration. Gaddock Teague, a pretty unpopular hate bear legendary creature, represents half the potential commanders you could play in the Kithkin type. The other is Bridget, a legendary archer who's only really remembered by the 1,000 odd humans on Earth who have an Ohabi Kaleria deck. Neither of these creatures really push us in any kind of mechanical direction for our new Kithkin. I mean, would anyone really be excited to draft in a format that had a hate bear archetype? Answer that question truthfully, but at your own peril. Life gain is another repeated motif throughout Lorwyn and Shadowmoor, with cards like Resplendent Mentor and Augury Adept. But these two are non-starters. Both D&D and Lord of the Rings halflings both trigger and care about life gain. If anything, leaning more heavily into this theme would only expedite calls for the Kithkin's conversion. There is one mechanic, however, or I think I should say process, something shared by both Lorwyn and Shadowmoor Kithkins, and not by their halfling counterparts, but also not by any other creature type in the whole of the game. Blinking. Now, lots of creature types have themes where they exile stuff from the battlefield only to return them later on. Some, like angels, do so as a means of dodging removal or removing problematic creatures. Others, like spirits, do so as a means of grinding out infinite value with enter the battlefield triggers. As someone who has a Preston EDH deck, I too can attest to the sweet joy that comes with spending 6 mana on 2 different Flickerwisp style effects, only to draw 7 cards, gain 20 life, and then pass the turn as if nothing happened. This is also a public service announcement. If you ever see a player with this bunny and this bird on their side of the board, they must be stopped, and you cannot wait for game actions to do the job for you. Reach under your table. I have planted a bazooka. However, as far as I'm aware, there's no single creature type in Magic the Gathering that cares about blink style effects happening. Now, I'm only a simple country rules lawyer. I don't necessarily know how to format a text box to convey the theme that I'm gonna attempt to pitch here. We went from bad Deep South to bad Christopher Walken real fast on that one. But Kithkin caring about their neighbours returning from adventures into the exile zone sounds deliciously thematic. Okay, here's my concept. Kithkin House Husband. It's a 1/1. Whenever another non-token Kithkin enters the battlefield from anywhere other than your hand, if a Kithkin you controlled left the battlefield this turn, create a food token. Of course, it wouldn't just have to be Kithkin. Remember, one of the central themes of OG Lorwyn was about creature types interacting with one another. So here's a second pitch. Thoughtweft Matchmaker. It's a 2/1. Whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield from anywhere other than your hand, if a creature you controlled that shared a creature type with it left the battlefield this turn, create a token copy of it, except it's a Kithkin. But maybe that's too exploitable. Remember, Preston is a menace that needs to be destroyed on sight, and as a result, you could even narrow this mechanic down to specifically look for creatures that left and entered. Here's my pitch for how that would look in rules. Kithkin Log Keeper. It's a 1/2. At the beginning of your end step, for each non-token Kithkin creature that entered the battlefield under your control this turn that shares a name with a creature you controlled that left the battlefield this turn, draw a card and discard a card. With this concept, suddenly Kithkins have a far more unique and interesting way of playing the game. One that not only differentiates them from their more traditional grub-loving halfling cousins, but also one that synergizes with at least some of their previous cards and mechanics. In conclusion, I should probably go and sit down for this bit actually. The reason why I've made this video is mostly as a thought experiment, or you could say a thought-weft experiment.
Boo!
Yep, fair. It's fun to flex our creative muscles and to play games designer for a time, but I also want to champion the niche, the forgotten, excellent parts of this game which make janky combos and laughable kindred strategies work. Upon becoming fascinated with Omo as a commander, I've fallen headfirst into scouring the catalogue of Magic's past cards for hidden utility pieces. A land which specifically untaps griffins. A lord for centaurs, where the only legendary centaur that cares about creature types cares about druids instead. Now that Commander has become a major player in planning Magic's future, there is an ironic trend in design to squeeze specificity out of cardstock to guarantee mass consumption. As more and more of Magic's genuinely original creations are quietly reduced to pure aesthetic markers, the less this game exists as a unique world. Its rough edges shaved down so that other toys can better fit into its sandpit. At its base, there is infinitely greater joy and creative engagement to be found in having an audience that has to ask, what is that? Than there is having an audience that looks at something and immediately understands what they're seeing. But I digress. What niche magic creatures do you want to see saved, or even explored further? Personally, I want to see as much of Magic's core identity and unique world building as is possible, maintained in the face of increasing outside IP saturation. If there is room enough for robots and Time Lords, Custodes and Tiefling, then there's room enough for Zubera, Lycid, and Nile Silve. Okay, maybe some errata is good. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that video and found it interesting. A massive thank you to CoolStuffInc.com for sponsoring this channel, and a extra special sugar-coated thank you to all of my lovely patrons, whose names include Mopkins, 1234 I declare a class war, 3D0, a communist right dimple, a filthy communist bunny, a gay American couple, a literal rock, a returning abuser of their power to make Spice 8 Rack promote the expansion Chariots of Steel for the indie TTRPG Flying Circus. By the gay tank game, this is not an official sponsor, but a threat. Hey, you know what? That is one way to use your Patreon credit privileges. Big up you. A treasure token featuring Spice 8 Rack's face, a waste of a perfectly good skeleton, A, B, C, D, F, E, G, H, K, I, J, L, N, M, O, P, Q, S, R, T, V, W, U, X, Y, Z, Adam Gable, Aesthetic Dialectic, Agent Maxwell, AJ Ingram, Alessia Karnin, Alex Berman, Aglai D. Siswai, Alice Paralis, Ali, Ambi Navy, an alt-right sleeper agent who gives money to communists, Booker Idaka, probably Tibble's persona, I draw penises on pastries, an entire council of ghosts, an exhausted capybara, an Umbreon pastry, Andrew Elf, Anne Morgana. Anthrocarbon has more issues than National Geographic, and a pitiable pursuit of parasocial approval seems to be won. Asmoron Damadaka Dystinacorda Cla's cooking blog, Astra Jade, Austin L, Bacchus98, Basugatsu Bakuhatsu Bakumatsu, Beefcake, Burbseed, Blue, aka Thalia will forever be my number 2 waifu, please break me out of the hell vault that is our capitalist society. Bloodagun, Brad Rutherford, Brian Dunn, Brian Rodham, Bridget Huang Tong, but you can call me Thrakazod. Jesus Christ, sorry about this, I'm definitely getting this wrong. Byra Diactor HK Bergdahl. Byrick Diactor Bergdahl? I'm really sorry if I'm getting that wrong. Carl, or is it Carl? That is the question. Charles Cohen, Chelsea Talbot, Chris DeVos, Chris Kitsune Campbell, Clayton Spezia, Cognitive Glitch, Conflicted Psyches, Connor Rentz, Cube Artisan, Daniel Morris, Dark Jin, David Reynolds, Devon McCullough, Dr. Rhino, Duncan Lindsay, Earl Grey T, Edward Gordon, Eric Lindhull, Irant Ianthe, Etienne Champion Masson, Eve Mizgala, Faxel, Frozen Monarch, Future Beagle, Gayula Creen Among Bears, Georgi Lyubanov, Georgina Kofi, Gitu Nullmage, Guilty Sonder, Horny Badger, Hooper Dub, Hypercube MTG, I am Kaz. I assume Chandra's rug matches her drapes, but I'd still tap that like the target land of her revolution. In response, I bolt myself. In response, table flip. In response, I mental misstep your bolt, paying 2 life. Jackson Crispin, Jackson Seamayer, Jackson West, Jake, who knows trans rights are human rights, Jason Dougherty, Jason LaRue, Jennifer Klein, Joel F., John Sheridan, Josh, Joshua M. Stephan, Julie Bunn, Julius Home, Kate B., Kay Santum, Kester, Khans of Tarkir is anti-Sultai revisionist propaganda, Kamoli let Zimone say fuck, Rio, Carl Denley, Leone, lover of dragons, Lewis, Lobo Loco loves Topo Chico, Lysius, Linnea, Madame Monroe, Magic Arcanum, Magic Fellow, Mario Romero, Mars Faye, Mente the Mage, Metal Gamer 21, Mika, Milo Wilson, Moose, Morbid Panda, Maury Robbins, Not Witty, Nathan Brinson, Nathan Speepisman Harris, Nemo Dactar, Num 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 Num, Yoshi! Nox, a trans otter, a little less tired, but as angry as ever. Obi-Wan Sherlock Close You. Omar El-Hebei. One day I will float into the sky like a balloon and my helium will be lost forever. One of the many people who cried 4 hours, 8 minutes and 30 seconds into the Tarkir video. One single mungus. Paper Crane, the Cuddle Demon. Pappy Markov was a mistake. Peter Carter. Phoenix Swans. Pivo. Hwasu, Raghava Kavali. Read this, I keep forgetting to do this. Read this in the voice of Werner Herzog. Rishi Sunak's Adidas Sambas choice sneakers for fascists worldwide. I forgot about that one. Robin, Rossome, Salty Crackers, Samuel Kona, Scrimblow Bimblow the Lovable Scrunko, several goblins in a trench coat, Sean Pittry, Skolaton, Sky Johnson, Solomon Maury, Sorry Zia, Stupid Pigeon, Swan Hunter, Thars Refined Grizzly, the A-positive blood type goddess of death, the anarchist insert into the world's strangest grocery sitcom, the entire B-movie script, the Jellybean Warlock, the Tamio Memorial Orphanage of Kamigawa, the Morik, the one who plays, This Old Planeswalker, Thomas Quinlan, Thomas Saint, Totally a Spy, aka He Who Simps for Emrakul, hashtag She Has Returned to Us, hashtag I Told You She'd Return, Travis K, Twilord, Undead Herbs, War Crimes, Ooh Woo, Well You Asked for It, Wesley, That Rat Bastard Communist, When I Close My Eyes, Niall Sylvain is there, watching, waiting, smiling, Whiskey Jack, Wilder New Year picked a really good time to start following T20 cricket, Will Drame, William Lyndon Smith, Wolf and Stoat, a gay Americana love story, Worston Show, Yeah! Yonkith McGee, Yorick Brekov, Yuki Akama, Zach G, Xanoron, and Zoidtastic. And a massive thank you to all of my absolutely wonderful patrons who continue to support my lovely work. If you'd like to join this list of names, then please do head over to patreon.com/spice8rack, and I'll see you there. And as always, stay spicy.